Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a good day. You're listening to or watching the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Tersh Blissett. Josh is not with us this morning. We are doing this episode a little bit earlier than his time zone would allow. It's pretty early where he is. But I was talking to a good friend of mine, Bill Spohn, and wanted him on the show. And so I was like, let's get you on here whenever I can, let's move things around. And so that's what we did. We got Bill on. And for those of you who don't know Bill, you're going to be in for a good treat. Bill's one of the smartest guys I know. He's a mechanical engineer. He's got all kinds of really awesome background. If you've ever heard me talk about TruTech Tools, he's the reason that we talk about that. So I'm super excited to have Bill on the show and to just talk about continuing education, because that's him. He's a constant learner forever and ever. So I'm not going to say too much before we get Bill on the show. But with that being said, let's get started with today's show.
Are you looking for valuable business advice to reach that 7-figure revenue mark? Do you want actionable tips to properly navigate through every business challenge you encounter along the way? Let Tersh Blissett and Josh Crouch be your guide in getting you to the top here at Service Business Mastery. Tune in as they sit down with world-renowned authors in business, leadership, and personal growth who share valuable insights about management, marketing, pricing, human resources, and so much more. Let their nuggets of wisdom gold guide you in owning a thriving, profitable, and ever-growing business. Here are your hosts, Tersh and Josh.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
Hey, good morning. What, are we supposed to do a podcast now?
Surprise.
Surprise.
How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. Thanks. I took a 2-mile walk around my property this morning.
So you're doing great.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. That's a 2-mile walk. No thanks.
Yeah. Listen to the podcast though. Not yours. Sorry. It was a Hidden Brain, right, which is a great one for listeners. You want to get into sort of like how we think, perceptions, that kind of thing, the hidden brain. This morning was about how we think we can spot scams and fakes, but we are tricked by sort of our human perceptions. It was a really good one.
That's cool. I can always rely on you to give me some different kind of podcast information. I was going to say weird, but that's not weird. I like that. So you have your own podcast too. Well, first off, for anybody who does not know who Bill is, can you give us a rundown of your background and how you are associated with Jim? Because a lot of people I talk to, I'll say, yeah, you know Bill, right? Bill Spohn. And they're like, sounds familiar. Is he related to Jim Bergman? Like,
yeah. So Jim's in my, so going back, trained as a mechanical engineer, just love physics and math, worked for Eastman Kodak, worked for Fisher Scientific, learned about lab instrumentation. So that's when the measurement stuff started to sink in with me. After that, I worked for Bacharach Test Instruments for 10 years, was an engineering manager there. Great time, sort of found my my training voice in this field by being asked to present technical topics to the sales and marketing team. And then got really interested in business, which was always my interest going way back to own my own business, like to high school. Mm-hmm. And then I worked for Superior Valve for 18 months, got to know about sort of more like the commodity side of the business, about copper, about valves, about rep networks and things like that. Very expansive understanding there. And then I worked for Testo for 10 years as product manager, helping to build their North American business. We actually were successful. I think it was around 13x over the course of 10 years. It grew over that time. And I didn't do that all alone. I was there along for the ride, but I got to meet a lot of great people, development engineers from Germany, my boss from the US, who had a great marketing mindset. And then that's where I met Jim. Actually, we were doing this. One of our sales managers, local reps, was doing a trade show run by a local regional wholesaler called Famous Supply. They call it the Famous Expo. they would run it at the IX Center, which was a huge convention center up in Cleveland. And this guy named Jim Bergman comes in with some of his students, because they allow students to come in. He was teaching at a career center, high school career center, so like 16 to 18-year-olds. And Jim came in the career center, and he had been challenged by his students. So he'll tell this story too, maybe a little bit differently, but challenged by his students when he would go into the classroom and present, a certain theory or calculation. Then he would go into the lab and make measurements. And they're like, Mr. Bergman, how come we can't measure in the lab what you showed us in the classroom? And he's like, that's just the way it is.
That's just how it is.
So that he accepted the status quo at that point. Going to this trade show, he sees the Testo booth. He sees the Testo humidity stick, which has, this was like I want to say like 2002, maybe 2001. It had probably 2002. It had a accuracy of about 3%. He's like, hey, I'm an educator. I'd like to try one. So he grabs it. Then he keeps on, then he goes back to his classroom. It's like, oh, now I can prove what I taught you in the classroom, or in the classroom, I can prove it in the lab. So like at that point, I say that's like when the fire got lit inside Jim Bergman.
Yeah. Then
he kept on coming back to that same rep and saying, hey, I want to know about this. I want to know about this. I want to know about this. That rep goes, my friend John is a rep. He goes, Bill, can you handle this guy? he's just too much. He's got way too many questions. I like questions. So that's where that's where I got to meet Jim, and he actually came to work for Testo as a technical advisor. And then we had a really great run working together there for about 7, 8 years.
Yeah.
And he would write articles. I would proofread them. A lot of great content. Videos weren't a big thing back then, but along that course of that time, that's when the TruTech idea started with Jim and his dad.
And what is that? What's TruTech?
So TruTech Tools. Jim and his dad went to a Testo meeting in Germany, actually their Christmas party. And his dad went along because he had been recently widowed and was retired. So he just went along sort of for the ride. His dad's passed away since then. But some managers in Germany are like, hey, you should start an internet business. And like 2 of them said that to him as a retirement hobby. Yeah. And he came back and grasped that idea. And within about 4 months, had a prototype for TruTech Tools. In the process, Jim was working with me at Testo, and he's like, hey, we want to call this website Totally Testo. I said, hang on a second. That's going to limit your future.
Yeah, that's going to pigeonhole you in there.
Yeah. So great idea, but you can start selling Testo. Absolutely. So he came back. Second round was TruTech Tools. I'm like, that has such a nice ring to it. It's got the technician in it. It's got technology. It's got truth, accuracy, all those kind of things built into it. What a wonderful name. So I started working with them as an advisor for a couple of years, and the company exploded. First year sales were $68,000. And this is selling tools and test instruments to technicians through a website. First year sales, $68,000. Second year, $750,000.
Oh, wow.
Third year, $2.4 million. And it's
slight amount of growth.
Yeah. So after it was in late 2008, after the first year was really ramping up, Jim's dad was like, hey, this is going somewhere, but I didn't want a job. I wanted a hobby. This is more than a hobby. Can you help me find someone to buy this? And Jim and I got together and said, well, we'll buy it from you. So we arranged it. So we had split the shares between his dad, myself, and I. And then we just continued to grow it, add product lines, but keeping that essence that Jim brought of the inquisitiveness, the education, the understanding, preaching what you know, and being honest about what you don't know.
And that was 2008, 2009-ish?
Yeah, 2007 was the founding of the company in April. Okay. And then 2008, it blew up by 10x. And then the next year, it was really 2009. It was the American, the ERA funding that went to weatherization. Because my background was from Testo and Bacharach, was working with weatherization agencies. And we put on the lines with blower doors, duct leakage tester, both the Energy Conservatory TEC,
Mm-hmm.
and Retrotech. We put both of those lines on within that period of time. And there was just so much interest. And I had a lot of connections going back from those of the 20 years of experience,
Mm-hmm.
and just people reaching out, needing the tools to do the low income weatherization work. Blower doors, duct leakage testers, thermal imagers, airflow meters.
Was Steve on with TEC at that time?
I know he became an owner recently, as in maybe like 5-6 years ago.
Okay.
And he was there for several years before that. I don't know his exact bio.
Gotcha.
I do know he was with TSI Elnor and worked on the Smart Hood. And for quite a period of time, he worked for Emerson, and I believe it was the flow control division. And that's where like all his like grounding in, he got so much experience in industrial physics, I call it.
Yeah.
But he plays that out for the HVAC world so well. And I really, really respect the guy. And if he says something, I know it's the answer.
That's the thing about Steve. Steve's kind of very reserved.
Yeah.
But when he says something, you're like, all right, I don't have to research it. I know
Nope.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's cool. I appreciate you sharing that background. A lot of people know who you are. They know your name. But then they're like, TruTech Tools, that's about it. I was like, yeah, but there's so much more than TruTech Tools when it comes to Bill. One of the things that I love to talk to you about is your podcast, HVAC Building Science.
Building HVAC science.
Exactly.
The HVAC is in the middle of the building.
Yeah. And I knew that I was going to screw that up because of the fact because I always think, HVAC building science, and you specifically didn't want it that way. You wanted it to be building HVAC science, which makes perfect sense whenever you explain why that is. Your podcast, you started the same time that I did, and in the same group, the Blue Collar Roots Network. And for those who don't know or haven't heard of your podcast, can you share what that is?
Sure. I just right now anymore, I say it's stuff that I find interesting and people I find interesting. So it's about products, processes, and just also I always like, whenever I have a guest on, is exploring the arc of their career. Had you on recently. That episode hasn't published yet. Shortly, we're going to have Chad Simpson on. He's got a really interesting story to tell. Had Josh Tiekle from Smart AC on. Allison Bales, Joe Medosh, Jim Bergman. And then I actually, and again, things that I find interesting as I head towards retirement at some point in the next few years, I'm looking at succession planning, business structure, things like that. So we operate our business with a thing called the Entrepreneurial Operating System, EOS.
EOS.
Highly recommended for people to look at that. Either one of two books, Traction, or one called Rocket Fuel. Pick up one of those books. They're inexpensive. I think you'll probably see some things that remind you of your reality and how you could change your reality to improve that. So I had our implementer from EOS on recently, Derek Pidak. I interviewed him. I've had on some local business consultants that help business owners do succession planning. So it's sort of gone a little bit astray from the building HVAC science. So I take that liberty because it's mine.
You're allowed to do that.
Yeah. And then the other thing is we hired Eric Kaiser, who's another great educator, solid person in the industry. We hired him at TruTech, sort of be my replacement. When I leave at some point, we need to still be grounded like we started off with, in the technical understanding, the process, and application. So Eric started full-time this past June. He's now the co-host of the Building HVAC Science podcast, because it's twofold. Take a little bit of work off the old guy, me, I guess, if you
Yeah.
didn't know that, and introduce him to sort of like my experiences, my background, my connections, where my head is at, and allow him to develop, his own from there. So it's been a really fun experience working with them. Just easy to work with, and he's got like his own strengths and skill sets, which I don't have, and I think it's a real nice blend.
And I mean, he's an extremely smart guy, and y'all mash very well together on the podcast because of like just your experience versus his experiences and the questions that you naturally both have. It was really easy conversation to have, with the two of you.
Oh, thank
which
you.
was really cool. So you're big on education, obviously. What's your thoughts whenever you're talking to people? Like you share that I want to make sure that everybody continues their education. How does that conversation go? Because for business owners, it's very easy for us to say, yeah, we want to continue training our technicians. We want them to continue training. But then whenever the rubber meets the road, that's not always the same conversation you have whenever your profits aren't there and you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think and I don't know this is true in 100% of the cases, but if you ask why, keep asking why a certain situation, like a downturn in profits or, excessive amount of callbacks, a lot of parts replacement, a lot of warranty claims. If you keep on asking why, with patience and with lack of emotion.
Yeah,
Seriously,
that's a hard one there.
Right. You got to like flush out the emotion from it. And I probably don't say it enough, but I always had this thought in my head. I don't get mad at people. I get mad at problems.
That's a good point. That is such a good point. Because there are times whenever I'm irritated or I'm frustrated and someone thinks that I'm frustrated at them. In reality, I'm not frustrated at them as a person. I'm frustrated at the situation or the lack of planning or the things that we could have prevented if we had just taken a little extra time.
And I'll make a guess. You're sometimes frustrated with yourself.
Oh yeah. More often than not. Yeah. Frustrated at
And it's
myself
like,
for not training.
how did this come to be? How did this come to happen? And I'll say like, oh, I know I've said this before, but it's like, okay, you didn't say it either enough in the right way. You didn't check for comprehension. It comes back to me.
And that's a great point. Repeat what you just said there.
Sure. If you're frustrated because it's like, I've said this before. I thought I've mentioned this, and it may be either you didn't say it enough times, didn't say it in the right context, or you didn't check for comprehension. Feedback to me what you heard. Reflective listening. Feedback to me.
That's a massive one right there. The feedback of what you heard, like show me, teach me, and then allow me to teach you what I learned. And that's something that's a concept that I never heard until a couple years back. And it's one of those things where like I think that I explain things perfectly because I'm the perfect explainer.
To yourself.
Exactly. It made complete sense to me.
Yeah.
But then I get this deer in the headlight look and I'm like, did you understand what I was saying? Uh-huh. Like,
yeah.
Are you sure? Because I have this sensation that you don't understand. You're not comprehending the words that are coming out of my mouth.
Right.
And then I say, okay, teach me what I just taught you. And then they're like, show me again. It's like, exactly. I don't think you understood that. That's a big one for me. Let me see. Oh, Tony got me distracted over here in the chat. My ADD kicks in when Tony's over here making comments on YouTube. So, moving forward, like what would you recommend a business owner when it comes to education? Like, what's your like go-to recommendation when it comes to that?
I think you have to look for what works for you. And I think this is where we talked before the show. There's no excuse for saying it's it's impossible to learn. It's impossible to integrate training. It is possible. There are businesses doing it, and you got to look at the correlation between business leaders that do a lot of training and their success, and one came before the other. So you have to steel yourself to say, I need to invest in this. I need to slow it down.
But there's so much other things that you got to do as a business owner. Like
Yeah.
you got to make sure marketing's there, make sure that the bills are paid, and make sure all this other stuff. Sometimes training becomes like the last thing you think about.
Yeah, it's like, a lot of people are familiar with investment portfolios. You have to sort of like build that pyramid of multiple, say, risk levels, multiple, how much your money is in which of these buckets. And you have to keep a balance between all of them. And, sometimes you need to, look, again, remove emotion and look for someone in the company that exhibits just a hint or a whiff of like wanting to be a trainer. They're the one that people go to and they educate. And then now you started to embed it. You put a spy into your network, and then it helped that person become the pole, the center point for training and education. I just look at everybody thinks, we're all successes overnight. But that overnight was 10 years long or so.
Right.
And just look around you, and just like some recent things that I became aware of, like Jennifer Manzo, HVA chicks.
Yeah.
And the free support network and all she does and tries to do for people. It's, and the whole HVAC school network, it's really become, just a
massive,
a monolith, megalith of
and it's a huge
assets.
Overnight success that took 10 years, like you said.
So I'll tell you, I think it was fall of 2016. It might've been winter 2015 that I get an email from this guy named Brian Orr. And he's like, hey, I'm doing this thing and I've got this podcast and this website. Would you be interested in working with me, sponsoring something like that? I said, I don't know. So like I waited like 6 months, and then he reached back out again. We started to talk, and then it was when I met him in person at AHR, and I think it was AHR. It might have been January 2017. I met him in person, and just like this vibe of honesty, like reached across the table, and we were having dinner, and I'm like, just mind made up. I'm working with you. What do you need? How are we going to do this? So, and I think it was like that summer that he came up with Blue Collar Roots Network.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I want you to do a podcast. I said, what's that? How do you do that? I can't, and it ended up being like really low investment, but it was about technique and organization. And now I'm Eric Kaiser's is, I'm showing him how I organize, but so two things. I just sort of drifted off track there, but I'll go back on track in two ways. It's use automation in tools, which absolutely, you and Josh know everything about, to enhance your ability to do these things. One saying I like to say around our place is, I'll invest in anything that takes away routine work from someone, so that they can focus on the humanity of the situation. The customer, usually it's the customer or the vendor, or maybe, it's understanding the market, spending time about things that are just, they can't be handled by a machine.
Yeah.
But I was talking about this yesterday with our webmaster. Back in the early days of TruTech, we ran on a website system that was sort of isolated. It didn't link to our books. So we actually had no way of telling inventory, how much was in inventory. And we had to manually, physically cut and paste
Whew.
order information over. That's where it was great having 3 teenage kids.
Yeah, I bet.
And but the orders like didn't get entered into the books until like that evening or the next morning or over the
So if you had
weekend
an
in wave.
influx of
Yeah.
orders and you thought you had plenty of inventory,
Yeah.
yeah, you could get screwed really quick on that.
Right. And that goes back to another saying I use, which we don't want to sell disappointment. And disappointment is, I thought it was in stock, but it isn't. Disappointment is, I thought it was this, but it isn't. That's not the right picture. That's not the right description. That doesn't do what I thought it would do. This doesn't work with that. So we do everything we can not to sell disappointment, because nobody wants to pay for that.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I know that is so true in your business, because I spoke with the other Eric, and he pulled me to the side a couple years back, and he was making these packages and like package deals on TruTech's website. And he was like, if you had to start up a new truck, a new technician, what would you purchase? Like, what would you combine together? And like, this is all the things that I'm going to buy. And I was like, oh, that's easy. Like, I already have that list, because I had a friend of mine who was an electrician and brought on an HVAC company and was buying all the, like, doing a full new truck. And he said, Tersh, what do I need to buy and where do I need to get it from? I was like, piece of cake, TruTech Tools. And I just sent him a list of links of like, all right, here's your vacuum pump, your recovery machine, your field piece job link probes, like all of, I just went through the whole gamut. And Eric asked me that, and I was like, here you go. I gave him like my little notepad thing that I have saved on my phone. I was like, here's what I tell everybody to order. And so then y'all created the package. And granted, it's not the cheapest thing on the website, but it's one package that you could just go in and purchase the whole package. And that's what you need to get started. And that ease, like that just, everything about that, I was like, I can't believe you did that, Eric. Like, I can't believe you actually took what I said and took that advice. That, I mean, it's so now whenever those same guys are buying stuff, they're like, here, like, what was that kit that you had? I was like, well, I don't have that. You don't have to use those individual ones anymore. You can just click right here on this one kit that Eric created. And I just think that is really cool. And the way that, like, I guess my question right now is, how did you handle not wanting to disappoint people during the pandemic, whenever there was such a limited supply of so many things?
Sure. At that point, since late 2016, we've had inventory is real time on our website. Maybe a little bit after, maybe like 2017. So, you know, we grew in phases to become what we are today, and still will grow more and do different things in the future, but always with the eye on the customer. I think it was actually some vendors came to us, and I'll just say the bricks and mortar weren't too open for business. And some of our vendors, they weren't interested in buying their products. So they came to us and said, hey, can you help us here? So we got some deals, or we had, available inventory, because they still had inventory, but it just wasn't available because it wasn't being sold. So it wasn't being purchased through into their system. So actually we went down in business for like 15 days. And I'm sort of in a lot of ways a planner. So I immediately came in with a phase down plan. Like, what would we do if this continued when it hits this level? And then we were tracking everything on a daily basis. If it hit this level, we're going to do this level, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. We never even needed to kick in any of those levels of the plan. Within 15 days, the business started to kick back up again.
Wow.
And it actually went beyond our expectations and our plan for the year. And I think it was because of lack of ability through, bricks and mortar, that you could get it online. and you didn't have to have contact with us. Basically, it was shipped in a package, and so I think we really benefited from new customers during COVID. But we had to keep our service level really high so that they would come back. And I can remember hearing our customer service team say, some people are saying, like, I've never shopped on the internet before. What is this?
Right.
So it was that we had like brand new customers to the whole experience.
Yeah. It's been like the first time I met you guys, like in person, you and Eric, I think it might've been at a, HVAC school symposium. And we were sitting at a table. Maybe it wasn't the first time.
No, that was Brian's little soiree.
Oh yeah,
here in Orlando.
Yeah. So
I forget what we called that. It was like a mastermind kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't remember either. That's been a long time ago. That's been a long time ago. But one of the times we were at the HVAC school symposium, Eric was at the table. And I was there, and I actually think it was Billy that was there at the table with him. And this guy was like, "Oh, that's a really cool tool." And I think Billy showed him how it worked and everything. And so he was like, "I'm gonna have to find out where to buy that." And I said, I was standing next to him. I was like, "Literally, they sell it here." And the guy was pulling up like his Amazon account, and I was like, I said, "Put that away. This is where you purchase it from, right here. Like, you buy it through TruTech Tools." And he said, "Oh, I thought you were just like a manufacturer rep or something." I was like, No. You buy it from them." And they're like, "Oh, that's really cool concept." And I was like, yeah, it is a cool concept. But
so I'm full of phrases. One of my phrases is, "We don't make anything except people happy when they get their delivery on time."
That's a good point. That is really
people
good
say,
point.
"What do you make?" We make people happy. So we do.
That's really cool. Oh man. So Bill, you and I, we have so many like conversations, inside jokes type things. And one thing I want to share with people, this has been, you might remember what year it was, but I don't remember what year it was. We were at HVAC school symposium, and Christopher Hughes, he was like, "Hey, let's all get the same house. Like, we're all going to stay here. Let's get the same house." And we're like, okay. I think this might've been the first, maybe the second year of this. They call it the Animal House now. And this house is full of people who are way smarter than I am when it comes to anything technical related. And we're standing around this huge, massive island of this house. It's a vacation rental house. It's got like 2 dishwashers, 2 sinks, but there's a spread of pizza across the island bar. And there's all kinds of guys. Christopher Hughes is there. Michael Hausch, like all kinds of people are standing around this bar, and they are just arguing stuff that I don't have a clue what they're talking about. Like, not even a slightest bit of an idea. They're talking about airflow, humidity. As soon as it comes out of a register, is it denser or the throw? And I just heard all these things, and I'm like, I just throw words in there, like, just to try and throw them all off. And they look at me like, "Are you serious? Like, that's really what?" "Oh yeah, I'm 100% serious." I don't have a clue what they're talking about. And they just take it that I know what I'm talking about at this point. And like, I thought they were going to get fighting mad. And then you and Eric are sitting at the table over on your laptops, like just away from us. And the funniest thing in the world, I think Christopher or somebody says, "Bill, what's the right answer?" And you look up and you're like, "Actually, you're both right in this little scenario here." And then I thought that every one of their heads were about to explode. And then they were like, "And at the same time, you're both wrong." And then I was like, "Oh, what are y'all going to say about that?" And then like, I'm like flipping boxes of lids of pizzas over, and they're like drawing with crayons in the boxes of these different. Oh man, it was the funniest time I've had, not knowing a thing that is going on in this conversation.
Yeah. And it's passion, and it's experience. And and also the willingness to put yourself out there. And I'll use a term called vulnerability. Both like, people talk a lot about emotional vulnerability. There's also technical vulnerability. You put yourself out there and be willing to be challenged, corrected, or appreciated, pat in the back or kicked in the butt.
And it's so funny. In that house, you would think it's just a bunch of alphas that are just, they know everything. They're not going to take advice from anyone. And you, like now, the last year we were at the house, and I mean, you had Steve Rogers, you had guys all walks of the gamut, and it's like these are all very, very, very smart people, and the fact that they're all willing to take advice and listen to others is just wild, in my opinion.
Yeah. Jeremy Garcia is another gem that I got to meet through that.
Henry was one of the ones drawn with the crayons
in
the box, so now he's got that stigma.
He does. It's attached to him. I had him on my podcast too. Interviewed him maybe last year. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a really good dude. He's very. He told me this. I don't know if this is true or not. He told me that he learned how to speak English by watching SpongeBob.
That is correct. Well, that's what he told me too, or told us, a group of us. So
okay.
Yeah, he's from Cuba. Yeah.
Bill, I always appreciate hanging out and chatting with you. I could chat with you for days. For people who want to learn more about you, connect with you, what's the best way for that to happen?
LinkedIn's got a lot of information. And the podcast is Building HVAC Science. There's a website, buildinghvacscience.com. I also, speaking of network people learning, I use my network connections to help build a home that we live in. Features of the home.
We didn't even talk about that.
Yeah. So that's Spohn Home, SPOHN HOME. There's a blog site, so spohnhome.com, but also a Facebook group. If you want to join it, just search for that and request to join. So we just we wanted to build our first and last house. We never built one before. We wanted to build like a forever home.
Yeah.
And but also wanted to tread lightly on the environment. So we built this. It ended up being net zero energy home, powered by solar on site. And we used a construction technique called volumetric modular, which is basically building boxes in a factory and stacking them and bolting them together on site.
That's really cool.
But added features like air tightness, insulation levels, triple pane windows, solar shading, solar gain on the windows, just played with a lot of different variables and pretty much hit the mark on what we were trying to do.
But it's not 100% off the grid, correct?
No, it's not off the grid at all. So that's one thing people have to separate. Net zero and off the grid are two different things. And then there's net zero, and I'll call it sloppy net zero. Sloppy net zero is you can take anything that runs on electric, basically, and it could be an energy hog, and you just could add more and more and more renewables.
Yeah.
Refined net zero, the way I like and the way we did it, is you get your energy consumption as down as possible, and then you power that by renewables. So net zero means we generate solar every day of the year. And it's got a dynamic ratio of 1 to 80. Some days we'll be getting 1 kilowatt hour, some days 80 kilowatt hours during the day. It just depends, but it's always producing something. It goes into the meter and it's either used by the house. If it's excess, it goes back to the grid, and the meter literally electronically goes backwards. However, at nighttime when the sun isn't shining, we pull from the grid, but we designed it to overproduce so that we can have that back and forth between things.
What about the pictures that I see of your solar panels covered in snow?
Yeah. So we did a ground mount array, mainly because of the look of the house. I didn't want to have panels. Well, I wanted the front of the house to face south, and I wanted tall windows in the great room. To put solar panels up would have been really awkward around that kind of shape for the house. So we had the luxury, the blessing benefit of being able to acquire 3 acres of land.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the ground mount panels. So they go about 12 feet, maybe 10 feet in the air, 12 feet in the air. So my wife and I'll go out there, and if the snow's on there and it's a heavier snow, we'll just get it. I have a truck snow brush on an extension, and I just put it up there, drag it down,
rake it off.
And the impact is huge. If it's a light amount of snow, because of the black background of where the cells are, the silicon cells are, it'll usually, if the sun does come out, they'll melt off.
Okay.
If it was rooftop, it would be really hard to do that.
Oh yeah,
to manage it. So I call it harvesting electrons. Farmer Bill harvesting electrons, or photons actually. And it's exercise. Walk out there and 8 inches of snow.
A win-win for everything.
And
then you're like miserable in the snow, like
no.
So one last thing, in that area, that's in like the northern Ohio area. That's heat pumps aren't typical, correct?
Yeah, we're actually. That's one thing is I don't have an office at TruTech.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked at home. Oh,
that's right. Yeah. You're not even there.
I've worked at home, like starting with Testo in 1999. So I think I'm one of the early work at home, remote office people. But so Western PA, it's about 100 miles from TruTech. So about the same kind of climate zone 5. It's, I guess, there aren't a lot of heat pumps here. I don't really know that for sure, but we did design with it's 2,900 square feet above ground plus 1,600 conditioned basement, so around 4,500 square feet, using a 2-ton air source heat pump for all the heating and cooling.
1 2-ton?
1 2-ton.
Yeah, that throws my rule of thumb right out the window. Yeah,
that you gotta chop that thumb off, Tersh.
Yeah, chop that thumb right off. That thumb has been chopped off by all the mistakes that have been made by it.
No, but you're willing to sit here and talk about them, which is fantastic.
Oh yeah, I'll share about it.
So we pushed the envelope literally by having an airtight envelope. But like in the wintertime, we have the sun comes in, we have high solar heat gain windows, so it actually warms the house. The triple pane windows.
What about during the summertime whenever you have the heat load?
Sure. So it doesn't get that bad here, but we do have on the big windows, we have indoor shades. Okay. So just dropping the indoor shades will do a lot on most of the windows. And there are fixed solar shades that are projections from the house, like around 2 feet or so, that block the summer sun. I've got some good, on the Facebook page, I got some good pictures, I think from May, really sharp sunlight coming down and casting a shadow over that window. But in the wintertime, the sun just comes right in because it's low in the sky. So it's like
the amount of planning it had to have taken to do that. Like I can't even see a custom builder going through that time, the time and energy of.
Yeah. I mean, you do have to be driven, but I'll say there's a lot of resources. There's a group of architects up in Maine. They wrote a book called Pretty Good House. And they have a website, a Pretty Good House, and there's like a checklist, Pretty Good House 2.0, and they lead you through it. There's Passive House, which is really strict, rule driven. You can register the house if it conforms with so much energy use per square foot. But the Pretty Good House is like more where I'm at. It uses a lot of the same principles, but doesn't go as extreme on them. But you can have a nice mix that comes together. For us, it was. We want to be able to do this, and it wasn't as important to get a rating as it was to do the project. So that we, gave up a few details to get there. Another good book is A House Needs to Breathe, or Does It, by Allison Bales, Dr. Allison Bales.
That was such a massive amount of controversy.
Oh yeah.
Like let's tighten up houses, tighten. And then all of a sudden you get just dirty sock and all this other stuff in the house. And
yeah, And you can't, but just like you said, a lot of details. You can't do it in isolation. Do your learning, check your sources. I mean, the phrase that a lot of people use is build it tight and ventilate right. Those two have to go together, like peanut butter and jelly. They got to go together. So we do have to have a mechanical ventilation. We actually have a mechanical ventilation with a heat pump in it, which is another rabbit hole that I went down.
Yeah, HRV.
Well, no, it's actually a CERV, a conditioning ERV.
Oh, yeah. It's not just a circulating.
Nope.
So it conditions it with a coil.
There's a third of a ton coil in there. Yeah. To exchange the sensible and latent heat between the indoor and outdoor air streams.
Man, that's intense. That's stuff you sometimes don't think about until you run into a problem.
Right.
And then after the fact, you're like, oh crap, I got to deal with this now.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. So one last question and I'll be done. I promise. The cost versus return on that initial investment, was it a massive amount of investment that's going to take a while to recoup?
I didn't look at it that way. And I was actually having this conversation, had some environmental engineering students over on Saturday from University of Pittsburgh to tour the house. And they asked the same kind of question. And it's sort of like, it's about using the investment. Yeah. So it's having a house where it's really pleasant to live in. The energy bills basically are non-existent. Our energy bills were about $150 electric. And that's just like that's not a month. That was a whole year.
Whoa.
$151 a year.
Yeah.
Because of this net metering thing. So I guess, again, we've been blessed, had the opportunity, and also had like the insights of hundreds of people who are in my network to drive me in the right direction, challenge me with the right questions, that kind of thing. For just the solar, I am doing ROI because I am also a volunteer advisor for Solar United Neighbors. And the ROI, I figure, for the way we designed the house, again, it was moving down that energy consumption for what we put in, and including tax credits and solar renewable energy credits and stuff. It'll be less than 7 years payback. So after 7 years, we don't pay a utility bill. We have a well, we have a septic system, which both run on electric. Everything in the house runs on electric. So the only thing is we have garbage in, garbage out. Garbage out is the trash pickup, and garbage in is the internet. Those are the only two utilities we pay.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Like,
but it's not off the grid.
Right.
But so I always got to make sure that people understand that.
Yeah. Because I see people spending $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 putting solar panels on top of their house, but what is probably not taken into consideration is the extreme amount of inefficiency the house is dealing with. That's the reason why the solar costs so much.
Right. Understand your consumption, get it down as much as you can. And I encourage anybody who's interested in this. I have an Emporia View energy monitor. It monitors 16 circuits. I'm always looking at that. And I found learned some things about our energy consumption even now that you wouldn't see unless you looked at it. So that's a good way to sort of and they're like less than $200. And it pulls it up on an app, you get historic data, and you can see what the different circuits are using. And then, sort of put that all together and figure out like your loading order if you want to start, reducing consumption.
And that's something that goes into your main panel? Yeah,
it goes into the load center inside the panel. Yeah, you put these current transformers on 16 circuits and also the main coming in. And then it's got a little box that's powered off of 120 with an antenna. Then it hooks to your in-house Wi-Fi, and then it goes to a website and you can pick it up from anywhere in the world.
Well, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Bill, I appreciate you hanging out with me and talking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Bill Spohn on LinkedIn. That's where he's most active there. Yeah. And I appreciate everybody that's hanging out, listening to this episode. If you have any questions for me, servicebusinessmastery.com. And until we talk again next time, I really appreciate you hanging out with me, Bill.
Thanks, Tersh. Always a pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Service Business Mastery. Now that you are equipped with essential business advice from this impactful conversation, you are one step closer to becoming the successful owner of your dreams. If this episode has been helpful to your business journey, don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and share it with other owners as well. Visit servicebusinessmastery.com